I looked at my hand and I saw that it was trillions of atoms,
Right.
and they were just vibrating at this certain frequency. And I looked over at my friend and he was the same atoms, but just a different frequency. And then the table, that was the same atoms, different, frequency. And I just was in awe. I was like, wow, I can never unsee this again. And there's so much more going on than we use our five senses for. When I come back out of this, I'm going to remember this and I'm going to tune back into this. If I ever try to trick myself into thinking it's as simple as my five senses lead me to believe every day.
You're listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a T. Torrance Productions original podcast.
Take a little trip. Take a little trip. Take a little trip with me. Today we're going down the rabbit hole. We're going into the world of psychedelics. Psychedelics. So we're going to be talking to someone about their experience and their recommendations for you and your future experience. So stay tuned. Welcome to the show. We are staring at the world today with Mr. Zappy Zapolin. He's a man of many trades who found his way down the road to psychedelics. People have referred to you as a psychedelic concierge, or you referred to yourself as a psychonaut, I believe, as I saw.
Yes.
and I want to get to all that, but when I have people on the show, before I, get to the psychedelic part of your journey, I kind of was really interested on the first half of your journey in life, kind of like where you came from, and how you were raised before you got to all the psychedelics and that part of your journey. Because for me, it's really interesting to hear where people came from, how they were raised. I always felt like that had a lot to do with our perspectives, or sometimes us needing to enhance those perspectives, So can you tell our viewers today, like, what was your family life like? What were your parents like? Where were you raised? What was going on with your world way back when?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I was raised in the idyllic setting outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in Lexington, Massachusetts, the home of the Revolution, the shot heard around the world. And it's a beautiful place to grow up because you're very close to Harvard Square when you're a young, teen, and you can go to Harvard Square in Boston, and so many young people always coming. It was just a fantastic place to grow up. But I will tell you that I think the spirit of kind of like the patriots and the revolutionaries really got into my energy from living there. And you always kind of had this feeling like, don't, where they were saying to you, like, don't let people tell you what to do. If they want to aggravate you, just go throw their tea in the water and tell them to come over and get it,
Right.
So that was always really infused in me. And I didn't necessarily think that I needed to listen to authorities quite the same as probably other people. And so I grew up, I had, an amazing experience when I was young using psychedelics that really did change my life as a teenager, where I'm just going to describe that I looked at my hand and I saw that it was trillions of atoms,
Right.
and they were just vibrating at this certain frequency. And I looked over at my friend and he was the same atoms, but just a different frequency. And then the table, that was the same atoms, different, frequency. And I just was in awe. I was like, wow, I can never unsee this again. And there's so much more going on than we use our five senses for. When I come back out of this, I'm going to remember this and I'm going to tune back into this. If I ever try to trick myself into thinking it's as simple as my five senses lead me to believe every day.
Right.
And so I described that how I got here was I wound up after college. I went to work on Wall Street and I got a job at Drexel Burnham, the high-flying Mike Milken's firm. We were at the top of the world. And I watched that experience with Wall Street and all that stuff. And it was great to see, but it really I was more entrepreneurial. It didn't fit me what I was doing. And I decided to leave that and go into at the time what was the infomercial business. They had just started letting you make your own TV show and buy airtime.
Right.
And I put some shows out, and had a really interesting business profile show with a lot of biotech companies and things. And friend and I were doing it together. And when those would play on television. And then when I saw the internet in the late 90s, I thought, wow, this is the evolution of television and direct marketing. I thought, if I can get involved here, my theory was, if I own one of these category generic domain names, that I would have a certain amount of credibility and I could build a marketing platform with one of these names. So I went out and I bought beer.com.
Right.
And I bought it from a young kid who had taken it, and I wound up giving him $80,000 for the domain name, and he kept 20% of it. And I went out and redeveloped that beer.com into a beer portal, how to brew beer, rate your favorite beer. And I turned around and I put some press out, and a couple months after I had bought it from him for $80,000, I sold it to Interbrew for $7 million. So I was like, wow, this is a good business here. So I went back and I got diamond.com and I got creditcards.com and things. And I really, built those things into different businesses and opportunities. And I hit a point in around 2010. That was a moment for me in my life where I felt like I had done everything society told me to do in order to be happy. And I did it, have a family, make a lot of money, have, all these things, you're going to be fulfilled. And I did it. I was like, oh my God, I'm not fulfilled. I'm having nice times, but I don't even know what I'm doing here. Yeah. And so I remembered back, to that psychedelic experience and thought, what if I went and sat with a shaman in the jungle, and my intent was to expand my consciousness? Maybe if I went in with that kind of an intent, I could learn something about myself and why I'm here and all that. And, decided to do that and film it. And I was lucky enough to get Michelle Rodriguez, the actress from Fast and Furious, to come with me and drink ayahuasca and San Pedro with a shaman in that movie. It's called The Reality of Truth. So It's kind of like how I got to that place of needing to tell people all about these medicines.
Can I ask you, and this is going way back again, but what did your parents do for a living and stuff when you were little? I mean, how did you clearly had this entrepreneurial kind of idea about just, I can do anything, or if I want to do something, I'll just go do it. I'm just trying to understand, how was that kind of ingrained in you, do you think? Was there something your parents were doing when you were a little kid, or something going on around you that kind of gave you some kind of fuel?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, my parents definitely inspired me. My mom was a teacher. She taught special needs kids who need a lot of attention and, need you to do things oftentimes in a different way. Yeah. And she was extremely tolerant of everyone. So I kind of learned that. And my dad's an engineer with multiple degrees from Columbia in engineering. And so he, was always the really, practical and get it made. And that combination, I think they just kind of instilled me with, you can do anything if you want to, get it. If you're passionate about it, you get educated about it. There's nothing you can't do. And I took that in, and on Wall Street, they brainwash you on Wall Street, and but they kind of have to. They say to you, you're a young person, you think $1 million is a lot of money. And if you think that, then you're going to have a hard time calling up our clients and telling them they need to put $1 million in when it's good for them. But you're just a young kid. You don't have a reference point. So we're here to tell you it's not a big deal. Yeah. Get on the phone. And they really, dialed that into me too. Just call the CEO, don't even talk to anybody else. Just call whoever can make the decision. That's the only person you want to talk to.
Right. I think, I grew up with a different perspective as a kid of pretty much blue collar. My parents worked all day, every day. I didn't see them a lot. And so we were more of running wild and free kind of childhood, and find out, learn by the mistakes you make all the time and falling down and getting back up. And, advice when I was young from my parents was more like, well, like you might like playing music, but you got to get a real job and don't try to make your dreams come true or. And so I think you get with kids those other perspectives. Some kids have parents who are just like, oh, sure, you can do that, no problem, A plus B equals
Right.
C, and it's a solvable problem, and this is how you do it. And it sounds like having an engineer for a dad and stuff that was really helpful in that process. And maybe you feel like you could do that. For me, it was like, let's shoot for the stars because we kind of have nothing to lose here. So let's start a band and do something crazy like that. And so you do it that way. And I'm always trying to find out from guests like which kind of road they took and how they got to that place where, because what you were doing went from real logical Wall Street, I'm going to make money, to like a hard left over to like, I don't want to be so much dealing with just the outside. I want to go to the inside here. And because you must have had some feeling, whether it was from your first psychedelic experience or something else that led you to believe there was more in there of value rather than I'm going to get $1 million or another $1 million or whatever it was, right? There was something was fueling that experience in you thinking this is the way to go. And you had some kind of background that felt like you could go that way and find it. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah. It's a little bit of that thing I said in the beginning about, think for yourself, and when you grow up again in Harvard Square in the shadows of, Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and these people, and they're like, think for yourself, and then you think for yourself and you think, wow, you know what? These adults don't necessarily really know what they're talking about. And then I saw the doctors and I thought, my God, like these doctors, once I learned about nutrition, I thought, my God, these doctors, they don't even know about nutrition. If you've ever been to a hospital and seen the food they serve, when food could solve most of the problems that they're addressing. And here they are not knowing about nutrition. I was like, well, okay, they don't know about psychedelics. Fine. We have to teach them. It's our job to educate them. It's not a conspiracy to keep it down. It's a total lack of education. And so when I came back from Peru, I just was like, okay, I'm, committed to getting this message out. And thankfully, we've had the reality of truth has been seen over 15 million times now. And it's credited with getting over 1 million people to have a psychedelic experience as a direct result of seeing the movie. And so that's satisfying to me. That's really, at the end of the day, what, makes me feel good.
Yeah, no, I watched it as well. I thought it was really nice. And one thing I will say about it, and it's odd about me, I was a very introspective kid. I was put in school really young, and so I didn't know a lot. So I learned to really like sit back and observe and pay attention. And from that process, I just learned a lot of what was going on around me and how to deal with it. And some of it was just that experience. It helped me deal with life as it was coming, but I had to do it differently than everybody else was doing it. So I had to kind of follow my own way of doing it. When you went to make the movie, and I don't know if this is before or after, but you talked about people having an empathy crisis. Was that, I don't know if that was something you discovered before or after your experience in Peru, and that, people were constantly looking to feel better, and find, happiness from outside themselves rather than inside. Was this things you realized before you made the movie or the documentary, or was it afterwards?
I think this was during my own process that I realized and thought, really, you have to go inside yourself for these answers. You can, if you try to find it externally, everybody's tried that and it hasn't worked. So now what is the opposite there? And so for me, going down and, and making sure that I was, going inside myself to try to get some answers seemed like the most logical thing to do. And so that was kind of what propelled me to do it. And I had that sort of insight that in myself that I wasn't totally empathetic. I wanted to care, somebody would say, oh my God, this bad thing's happening. And I go, oh, that's terrible. What could we do? And then my phone rings and I'm like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, hold on. And then I'm over here, and It's like, I think empathy is basically the difference is you're actually putting yourself in the shoes of the other person and feeling their feelings, So I think we're having an empathy crisis right now, and we need to feel more. And the only way I've seen anybody get instantly more empathy is to have a near-death experience or to have some major psychedelic breakthrough.
Yeah.
So
I experimented in my 20s with some psychedelics as well. And I'll say, like, in the late 70s, it seemed like stuff that I took was pretty mild and pretty, fun. It wasn't so much mind altering. But as we got into the 80s, I remember with some mushrooms and something we called gels, which just the tiniest little squares of green, clear, what looked like almost candy. But they took me a lot. It was much more intense when I took those. And I remembered the experience of looking at the ground and seeing the vibrating, everything was vibrating, and looking up at the sky and feeling like, it was nighttime, but feeling like I could literally just fall right into it and stuff. And there's a feeling of everything coming together. When I got out of high school, I remember I wasn't a big reader, but after high school, I started reading some stuff about Eastern mysticism and stuff like that. And the best book for me that I ever found was The Tao of Physics. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's a great book that draws the parallels between Eastern mysticism and where physics was. And one of the things they talk about in that book is just that idea that we are all just energy vibrating. And it literally, if you could get down to a subatomic type level, you could float through anything, because you would see everything is not solid and not permanent and stuff like that. And what I think you're saying is the psychedelics kind of open up that experience too. It's a way to bring people's minds to that they can maybe make sense of this world they're living in a little bit better. Like you say, obviously near death, where people get these horrific diseases and stuff, you see people come out with a whole different perspective on life and how important it is and stuff. But some of what you're talking about is pretty heavy experiences as far as the ayahuasca stuff that you do. I mean, that takes you on a very far beyond what taking some mushrooms we're going to ever experience, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, each of these plants, what's really amazing is each one of these plants has a different spirit, a different frequency, a different attribute, and even a different thing that it can heal. So when I, as a psychedelic concierge, and I say that because, when you go to a hotel and you see a concierge, they usually say, what kind of food do you like? You want music? Do you like wine, indoor, outdoor? And they make a recommendation. I talk to the people about what their traumas are and what their intent is for doing the journey. Right. And if that's aligned, then, or when I see where they're at, then I'm able to make a recommendation. And in my new Lamar Odom Reborn documentary, where I gave Lamar this psychedelic intervention, there was a formula that I created for him. And that formula was ketamine plus plant medicine plus a daily practice like meditation or breathing equals a conscious transformation. Right. And so you really have to, if, I'm just going to give you an example, but if somebody is, generally depressed, maybe they need some psilocybin mushroom microdoses. If they have an addiction profile, maybe they need ibogaine, an African root that can break a heroin addiction or opiate addiction in 1 12-hour session. If they're disconnected from nature, maybe they need some San Pedro cactus. And so each one of these things has their energy and thing they can do. And I think what I'm fighting for right now, I have a nonprofit called the Mind Army. Right. And the Mind Army is fighting for the right to pursue happiness. Yeah. And we believe it's everybody's inalienable right to go inside their own minds for answers and healing. And so we are asking the government, we're petitioning the DEA to look at the most recent research and to agree to regular rescheduling meetings of rescheduling these compounds. And to me, if we do that, then all of these things can be studied. We can figure out what the right dose is, who should have what, and we can really figure out how to integrate these psychedelic medicines into our battle with mental health and addiction.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too, how long like you're able to prescribe different remedies, different frequencies for different ailments people are going through. Like, how long did it take you to find any of these answers for these things? I mean, is it just through personal experience, or do you have a whole team of people who like study these things? Are you chemically studying it? Like, how much research is really going into all of it?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I have some teams, around me that some are scientists, some are doctors, some are clinical trial experts and things like that. So I'm just, very lucky that I have that, but I wouldn't recommend anything to anyone that I didn't have a personal experience with.
Right.
Because, the language that you use with these different things and, the experiences, they can vary so much that
Sure.
It's really important. When you do a psychedelic, the most important thing is what set and setting are you in?
Right.
And setting, they usually set means your mindset that you're going into it with.
Right.
And the setting is where you're doing it and who you're with.
Right.
If you can be with somebody who's going to guide you and has some experience, that is, you're probably going to have a fantastic experience. So it's really about, making sure that you have that set and setting so that you can get the most out of the experience and not, create some new kind of trauma from
Right.
having taken something in the wrong place and being scared or something like that. So.
Right. Which is really, like when I was young, we just took too much in a bad setting and, and it was just foolish kids. And it wasn't a terrible experience, but it was that thing like you talked about in the movie about that you want to fight it instead of being able to surrender to it. And it's the surrendering to the trip that is going to help you, and the fighting it is not. But if you're just some kids, in a room full of posters listening to rock music, it's probably you didn't go into it with the ideal setting to do any kind of healing as much as you were just thinking you're going to do something crazy. And that's not going to help anybody or anything. And that's where it felt like just too much to me. And I was just like, this wasn't enjoyable, and you're really, I think, saying that it should feel very enjoyable and enlightening, and you should feel changed in some dramatic way afterwards.
Yeah. I think that really is the goal, is to, expand your consciousness. And I tell people, my golden rules for expanding your consciousness are, trust nature. That's an easy thing to do. And don't take anything seriously, because that's really the mistake probably in life. And it's the mistake in psychedelics is to, take something really seriously. And when you don't take it seriously, you see how quickly it shifts and becomes something else. And so, right set and setting, doing it, with the right intent, I think you're going to have an amazing experience. That's kind of the thing that, we've had so many millions of people do these things. And this is what's, troubling about right now, that these compounds are Schedule 1, which is the same as, say, meth or heroin or something. Right. It's Schedule 1, the definition is that it has no medical benefit and it has highly likelihood for abuse or addiction. And the reality is that psychedelics have both of those. They have, have incredible medical value, and they're really some of the most least psychedelic compounds on the planet. After you do these, you usually come out and have a lot more reverence for them and think to yourself, okay, the next time I do that, I need to do it maybe even in a different way.
Yeah.
And so,
well, like in the movie, you guys, it's an incredible journey. You take up a mountain in Peru, right? And you drink something that was created by a guy who's professional. I mean, this is what he does, and he's not just some, nobody who's hanging out. He's a real shaman.
Multi-generational shaman.
Knew what he was doing, knew the setting. It was a beautiful setting, and you talk about it quite a bit. Everybody should go to YouTube and watch it. It's really worth watching. And several of the people in it had very life-changing experience. There was another, I can't remember his name now, a friend of yours who was, I think, a producer who went down to Mexico and took a different drug, but he talked at length about an amazing, experience he had where he had been heavily into abusing substances beforehand and was able to walk away from all of it after just that one experience. So it sounds to me like there's just profound application that can be done here, especially if it's done right. How difficult would it be, do you think, for you to set up a situation where people could go and get therapies like this?
Yeah, I think we're going to make it happen. It really comes down to, educating the U.S. government, allowing them to, have veterans access things like ketamine, because that is an incredible breakthrough, an FDA-approved medication that can break suicidal ideation in one treatment. Incredible. That's what we need. And I see the people in Ukraine, and I see that war, and I think, wow, all these people are going to need ketamine treatments because they have PTSD and they're still going to have to live their life after this. And we got to help these people. And I think we have to lead as, citizens, because again, our government 55 years ago said, hey, we need to study these psychedelic compounds for safety. So they're illegal until we study them for safety. And then 55 years later, millions of people have done them, many with great benefit. And the government's still sitting there saying, okay, alcohol's good, tobacco's good, but psilocybin mushroom, somehow that's bad. And you can't even access it if your family's in crisis. And I'm just not living in that reality. I'm just not. And that's what the Mind Army is saying, is like, we don't accept that in 2022.
Right. At the very least, there should be a setting, a place you can go for therapies. If we're going to let people drive down the road drunk every night, we certainly should allow for somebody
to Las Vegas,
to go to a clinic or a setting like you would a spa or something, and be able to have a guided experience with this as a medicine. When I was growing up, pot was the bad thing. Smoking weed was terrible. And now it's just multi-billion-dollar industry. I see CBD, everything, everywhere. And we've learned that it helps with all kinds of different medical situations, whether it's PTSD or anything like that. It's actually helping. I don't see why we wouldn't think the same for the medicines you're talking about as well. It makes no sense to me that we couldn't have a setting where, but do you think it's likely that, I think you're saying you see a way it could happen, but how realistically, where are we in that struggle right now with people in Congress? Because like you said, the world, it feels these days like it's never been more divided, not just in the world, but even in our own country. I don't remember it being so divided and finger pointing and stuff like that. And how likely you think we are, or how close we are to maybe getting stuff like that? Do you see good signs that things are happening?
I do. I see some great signs for that. What's happening is MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, is about to go into phase 3 clinical trials and be available next year from an organization called MAPS. You're going to be able to go into a clinic and do PTSD for veterans. They're going to be able to go in, have MDMA sessions, guided therapy, and that's already, being FDA approved. And that's incredible. The results are that after 2 months after they had the MDMA therapy, they tested these veterans, and 70% of them no longer had PTSD. All the other medications that we have out there for that are only antidepressants and things that change your brain chemistry, and they were masking the symptoms only. So just masking the symptoms, where 70% didn't have any PTSD, and then they checked them a year later and they were better than they were after 2 months. So my point is, this is going to come online. Psilocybin is getting breakthrough therapy status very shortly, I believe. It's already rumbling, and many states have decriminalized already. And ketamine is FDA approved. So we've already got, and Johnson & Johnson made a ketamine derivative. So we got a lot of activity. I think the mental health crisis is what's going to accelerate it that much faster. And make this available, because unfortunately, coming out of the pandemic, almost everybody has PTSD that has to be dealt with. And we can't go back to talk therapy and antidepressants. We need a new way. And unlike cannabis, that has a reputation of being recreational, I think people right now see psychedelics as medical, and they see that this is about mental health and it's very medical. And I think it's going to be legalized even before cannabis.
Yeah. Well, that would be incredible. Do you think the big giant, pharmaceutical companies are need to get all positioned to profit on it first, like, we normally see? Is that going to be a stumbling block? And you brought it up earlier how, early on I had done a lot of research into nutrition and stuff too in my life, because I noticed it made a big difference. And I didn't like how our medical system just treated the symptoms, like you just said. It's always about treating symptoms rather than the cause, the root of what's going on in someone, whereas good nutrition or exercise or meditation and things like these could get more at the cause, the root cause of what's causing these things. For one, do you think people can get, will that system ever change, or is the pharmaceutical company going to ever come around to it? Or are they going to wait till it's more viable for them to make money off it? Or are they fighting it now? Or can you talk about that to me a little bit?
Yeah. So the good news is that they are open to it. They're clearly taking a position of letting private enterprise develop these things and then come along with their big checkbooks and buy them. They're already starting to make some moves. So that's a good sign. But what's exciting to me is that the only people bigger than the pharmaceutical industry is the insurance companies.
Yeah.
And the insurance companies they've realized that instead of having to pay for antipsychotic medications and talk therapy and people going in the emergency room having a panic attack, all that expense, if they could be giving somebody, let's say, $5 worth of ketamine that's FDA approved, well, then they want to do that. And they're already, I know, doing their own clinical trials with psychedelics versus the antidepressants. And they're going to shake up the pharmaceutical companies and say, we're not paying for this other stuff. Like, get busy over here, because we know it works and we know it's cheap.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Because you got the 800-pound gorilla with us,
that is big business when you're talking about insurance companies. But if they're going to survive, they have to function, right? They have to look at their bottom line, and they're always trying to make more money. And if that's proven, if there's science to back it up and stuff, it would make a lot of sense. I just have never seen that happen before. I don't think, where insurance companies kind of led the way for the medical or pharmaceutical to follow in. That's really, really interesting to me, because they tend to want to get in the way, or at least get positioned for something before they ever get it, to let it out in the open to where people could do it. Because when I was young, it was drugs equal bad. It's if you're taking a drug, you must be a bad person doing something bad. I don't take drugs anymore. I don't even smoke weed. I stopped when my kids were born and stuff. Because it was a personal choice, I felt like I really wanted to be there for every moment of it, whether it was good or bad. I didn't want anything to blur. I had grown up with alcoholic parents and they were so not there for it that I just wanted to be present for all of it. But I feel like, there's ways to get it, but I think for a lot of people, one thing I will say about some drugs, they really can stimulate creative energy in you, and that can go a long way for people. The thing I wasn't sure of, and maybe you can talk to me about this, is I was never sure if it was real or not. Like when I would work on music under the influence, I was never quite certain it was as good as if I was purely working on something with no influence. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Does that make any sense to you, what I'm talking about at all?
Because definitely.
Sometimes I heard like, oh, you're just overstimulating your brain synapses, and that's what makes you feel like you're stoned or tripping or something. And then I thought, well, is it really happening at all? But what you're talking about must be way beyond what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that of course there's the cures for depression and PTSD and addiction and things that's very promising. But I think the peak performance aspect of psychedelics is really probably going to be 50% of psychedelics, because what I'm seeing is that if humans are using, say, 5% of their brain,
Yeah.
and then they could use some, God-given compound that's growing out of the ground to turn their brain on more, to create new neural pathways and create neuroplasticity, like, why wouldn't that be a good thing for people? And I think that for me, I always look at it as, we we need something that can accelerate our brain power, because I don't think our brains were set up to handle this much information and technology, and people are getting frozen.
Yeah.
So we have things like ketamine that may be able to kind of, leap forward our consciousness or our brain capabilities. And so I think we have to do the research, but we're going to find out that, for example, psilocybin mushrooms, probably going to eliminate all the antidepressants in the world.
Oh, that would be cool.
But at the same time, these can be used for peak performance. If you take a microdose of psilocybin or a microdose of LSD, this is like a sub-perceptual dose that you're taking.
Right.
And if you do that a couple times a week with some mushrooms or some LSD, you're going to have a very interesting opportunity to look at something maybe from a third-party perspective, to see something beyond your human filters. Because my theory, Kurt, is everybody's just filtering everything.
Yeah.
We're humans. So when something comes into our radar, we're like, oh my God, danger, and look over and then something else. And we have to figure out a way to step outside of that human filter. And that's what I think psychedelics do, is they take you beyond your humanness, and then you're able to look at things in a new way. Right. And for me, that really feels like what people need right now. And from a creativity standpoint, when you're working at Facebook and they say, hey, come up with the next new great app, you can sit there all day trying to come up with something. It's like somebody saying to you, hey, come up with the next hit song. It's like, oh man, like, where am I going to get this, inspiration from, or a different look or something? And so sometimes when you're, shutting off some of those filtering mechanisms, now you're connected, and that can be a very powerful creativity tool.
Yeah. I'm certain of someone who suffers from depression. Yeah, I've all my life and stuff. And I found getting stoned was a way to lift up out of that. And I saw it for that. I realized what it was doing to me. But I just, I think what you're talking about is, or maybe you can tell me, that there's more physical changes going on in your brain by taking these psychedelic type therapies, that it's, am I saying it right? Is it just synapses being overstimulated, or are you really able to kind of change the way you're thinking about stuff in a way, like when you talk about someone getting over alcoholism or a heroin addiction, you really have to do some serious, the brain has to change a lot there, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not a small thing.
No, there's great science out now, though, that I'll give you an example. The ketamine, they found that, this is in Nature magazine, that you have a default mode network in your brain that's always defaulting either to, negativity or creativity. And some people are more prone to one or the other. When you, in your default mode network, you have a mechanism called your lateral habenula. And your lateral habenula is recording all the stress you've ever had in your whole life. When it becomes too much, your brain goes into this burst mode, which is a completely different brain state. And when your brain's in burst mode, it shuts off your dopamine production, which is your happiness and your motivation. And a lot of people are stuck in that mode. The first time they do the medical ketamine, it takes the brain out of burst mode, and you immediately start getting your dopamine back.
Wow.
So I always get a call from the husband or the wife the next day, and they're like, oh my God, he just cleaned the attic. Like, he claimed he was going to do that for 5 years. Whatever you're doing, keep going. But really, they just it got their dopamine back. It was as simple as that.
Right.
And, so there's just like a lot of evidence and a lot of, things to be hopeful for.
Yeah. The name of this podcast, Staring at the World, was from a song I wrote back in the 90s. And the reason I wrote that song, Staring at the World, was I was thinking about perspective. We all have this, and why I asked you about your childhood, it seems like we all come from this perspective mode that's in there. I think what you're talking about in our brains of we're told what to believe a bit, and we're told what's real and what's not real, and all these things as our brains are developing as kids, and we all see this world from this certain perspective. We're all staring at the world from this one point. And I think what you're saying is with some of these therapies and psychedelics, we could step out of that for a while and see it, which, Buddhists have been talking about forever too, this sense of like no mind, that you're not seeing it through all these filters all the time, that you're so locked into. And now, when you look at this, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, I hate you, it's so locked into this filter place that there's no reality to it. You can't hold it in your hand and show it to anybody. It's just made up fiction entirely. And what I think you're saying is some of these therapies could help a lot of people step out of that mode and maybe see the world for the very first time, really.
Yes, new eyes, because, these are, transformative compounds. And I think the problem, like I said, empathy crisis, but the problem is, we are jaded right now. People are like, there's no miracles. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like the sun is 93 million miles away. It's like perfect to give us an atmosphere. And I'm talking on the phone in real time video to China. Like this is a miracle, and they're like, no. And then you do the psychedelics and you reconnect to that miracle. And when you come out, you think, wow, you know what? I'm in this virtual reality 3D suit. Like I might as well enjoy it and accept that it's a beautiful miracle.
Yeah. And there's so much of this. I think people are afraid right now too. There's so much fear. Everyone's about, I need to be strong. I need to fight the other side, fight for what I believe, as if, I see people like thinking their opinion of something is truth. It's like we've lost the very definition of what truth is anymore, because everybody thinks that their opinion of some subject matter is the truth. And it just seems so screwed up. And because everyone feels like they have to be strong, I wonder how we get them into a therapy like this to get them to just let go a little bit and maybe let some of it happen.
That's a good question.
But because maybe by letting go and of all this fear that you have, maybe you would be stronger in the end, being wiser. I don't know.
Yes. I think it is. It's like the more flexible, how the bamboo tree doesn't break, because it bends. And I think we need some neuroplasticity now. We need to see things not as black and white. And so how are we going to do that? I see that we have this incredible energy technology that the universe is giving us. And I always say to religious people, I'm like, well, if you believe in God and God is all knowing, don't you think they would have put some things here to tap us into spirituality and break addiction? Like, wouldn't you just think there'd be some stuff here?
Yeah.
So,
and what's the difference between when you go to your doctor and get prescribed a drug, you're fine with it, but this over here is just supposed to be voodoo. It doesn't make any sense when you look at they're both coming from a plant or something like that. They're both made of the same thing here on the earth, right? Couldn't they all be helpful? Is there places? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that we're in this great place where after the pandemic, people really are thinking for themselves a lot about their own health, mental health. And we're finally at this place where people are going to, like my parents' age, who are in the early 80s, who, always told me, I'm a Grateful Dead fan. I'm a Deadhead. So I'd go to Dead shows and they'd say, oh, don't smoke marijuana or do drugs. And I was like, well, I'm definitely going to smoke marijuana. I'm probably going to do some drugs, but sure, and then, marijuana, then when marijuana became legal in Massachusetts, my mom said, oh, let me try this. And she tries an edible and she's like, wow, you know what? This is making me feel better.
Yeah.
Inflammation. Like maybe they lied to me the whole time. So then when I've come to her, talking about psychedelics, she's not as resistant anymore. She really figures they probably did lie to her about that. And there's some benefit. So I think it's going to be not people thinking, oh, I want to get enlightened. What should I do? It's going to be people saying, I have PTSD. How do I solve this? Then they solve it with a psychedelic and they go, oh, wow. Okay.
Right.
Well, let me look into ayahuasca or, psilocybin. So
right. And you're not
I think that's the way it's going to go.
You're not talking about going to your friend's garage and just throwing some mushrooms back. You're talking about, like what you talked about earlier, was just very specific, information on what you might need and consulting with professionals who know what they're doing. So my question to you is, where would somebody go for information on this? If somebody was like, wow, this sounds like it might be helpful. I'm super depressed or I can't stop drinking and I know it's destructive and I want to try some other things. Where do they go to start looking into help?
Yeah. So, there's a number of organizations, including maps.org, that has a lot of incredible resources in science and harm reduction and all kinds of great things. There are now, if you go online, you can see now that we have some psychedelic neutral places where they've decriminalized, like Oregon, Denver, Berkeley, Ann Arbor, Michigan. To be in one of those places, if you are and you do find yourself there, you should seriously consider finding somebody locally. And there's a lot of people you can find these days. The internet is really bringing people together. And so you're going to find somebody and you're going to find some good plant material. And so, it's a great time to be out there. And especially, when you think about the more the synthetic things that are out there now that people are using that turn out to be fentanyl and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's a lot better to, take some mushrooms that are mushrooms or, to take some plant materials, maybe, again, ketamine is medically approved and being, given to hundreds of thousands of people right now. So, just finding what's right for you. I think ketamine is very approachable. I think in every city you can find somebody who has microdosing capsules of psilocybin now. And, as much as I don't always like to say, hey, just go into your friend's garage and take some mushrooms. But to be honest with you, that's like a better thing than saying to somebody, hey, go get on this drug regimen, this antidepressant that's going to be in your body 24 hours a day, changing your brain chemistry, and then go talk to somebody about your problems and blah, blah, blah. I'd rather they go in the garage and, watch a YouTube video and then eat the mushrooms. They're going to be safer, Right.
No, I just think, though, when it gets to be more of a place like people go to a doctor's office, they get prescribed something they trusted. I think the day that people can do that with these psychedelics you're talking about, that it'll be a lot more functional in our society for that reason, because they're going to get these really destructive antidepressants now, and they're perfectly fine with that. But the day that they can just go and under, it's legal and you're educated and you're with medical professionals of some sort, and you can still take this other route that might be healthier and better for you, I think a lot of people would probably go that route. And
I think that's what's happening. I want to say one thing about, I always knew your song, that, Closer to Free. And I think, that song really is an amazing psychedelic song, because it's really what it's about. It's like being free. It's like, that's what we want, and we want to have these connections, and we want to, just have these inalienable things, and freedom is number one. And if you don't have the freedom to go inside your mind, I would say that's modern day slavery right now.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people are afraid to be free. I think it's really actually hard. When you're working to pay the bills all the time, you got a mortgage, you got all this stuff going on and all this stress, and your kids you're trying to raise or whatever. It's really, I think everybody would agree, it can be really hard to be free, but it's really a lifestyle choice. I mean, it's not like you're being irresponsible or choosing your responsibility, or you're just going to step off from life, but It's about making everyday choices that can lead you the right path, the right direction towards that sort of freedom, which is what I preach when we go out and play shows too. My whole thing to everyone is like, I sing a whole show of songs to people, and I say to anyone, notice how we're just having fun singing together. There's no division here. No one's like, I'm on this side, I'm on this side, I hate you, you're the problem, you're the problem. It's just everyone just for a couple hours, we can get together and unite and create this energy, and that's a great experience for everybody. It's a healing one.
Yeah.
And I think we're talking about similar things with finding ways to heal things like depression in your life or drug abuse and things like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like even, freedom in your mind, because like, if you, I took a group out to the desert a couple weeks ago. We had a reporter from Forbes magazine and one from Double Blind magazine, the psychedelic journal, and a big group of diverse people. And we went out and we had a psychedelic experience as a group out in the desert. But the idea was that we were saying, hey, we're all busy people. We could be somewhere else doing something with our family or business, but we're taking the time out for ourselves. We're going to go inside our minds, and it's going to make us better when we come out for those people. And so like you said, hey, when you're trying to pay the mortgage and that, you want to be free, but you can't. But maybe if you took the weekend, went out into nature, had a psychedelic experience and came back, you would say, hey, you know what? I still got to go to work tomorrow, but I am free. I'm free to, enjoy it. I'm free to, not react to things. I'm free to be creative.
Yeah.
So I can go to my job. I can pay that mortgage, but I can be free in my spirit.
Yeah. And I recommend creativity to everybody as well. That's another healing energy out there. I think we were born with it from the time we're little babies, and it's always in there, and somehow society can kind of snuff it down if you're not careful. But creativity is another key there to freedom as well. Hey, man, Zappy, I want to thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I sure hope we covered everything you wanted to cover. Is there anything I missed?
No, I don't think so. I would ask people to check out the mindarmy.org and get involved. We're going to have some information out about our new legal team. We have the top 5 lawyers in the psychedelic industry that are going to help us do this petition. And I think it's just going to, all boats are going to rise with the tide if we can get these things to be able to be researched and doctors to use them. We can, before this country and the world goes off the cliff, I think psychedelics are going to take us to the left or the right and save the day. So I'm very hopeful. And, I always love when I meet a real, artist, musician, because that is a major way to expand your consciousness is to create. And so I have a lot of respect for artists.
I agree. Like I said, I think it's part of that healing energy, music, creativity, all this stuff is positive energy in the world. And like we were talking about, this world needs it. Can use all of it right now with all the divisiveness and the crazy, crazy stuff going on with wars. I never thought I'd even see this happen again in my lifetime. Every day I see the news, I'm just horrified. Like, how can anyone's mindset think this is okay, or I should have a right to go and do something like this in this world? Like, it's just, my mind can't even comprehend that somebody can think that way. And there it is right in front of me every day. So we need all this other kind of energy to just really help. Like you say, we need an army, a mind army of people to work for positive energy, man, and work to heal this world, because it doesn't have to be bombs and bullets and killing at all. It really doesn't. So it's all what you want. So anyways,
it's a miracle.
Yeah, right. It can be a miracle. Every day you can wake up to that, and that's real, and that's true. It sounds up in the air, but it is rock solid, man. So thank you for joining me.
All right,
appreciate it.
Too. Peace.
Good luck
Thank
with
you.
everything. You take care of yourself. There you have it. Incredible conversation, ideas, topics, psychedelics. I haven't done that in a long time, but it looks like it has got some promising future for it. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going to ask you again, subscribe, rate, review, interact, be part of this. I got these guitars back here, but I need viewers watching this, or, it's not much to it. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon, staring at the world. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a podcast about creative innovation. Please be sure to download, subscribe, rate, and review, and keep listening wherever you get your podcasts.